This is Radio 84 MHz, broadcasting from the bustling streets and hidden alleys of Vietnam. You are tuning in to the frequency of authentic stories and unfiltered vibes. Mark came to buy a factory. He found a fortress. Watch as a predatory investor discovers that Vietnam's greatest asset isn't cheap labor, but a 40-year grand strategy hidden in plain sight. The hunter is about to become the student. Presenting Vietnam Played Us All, a Wall Street confession. Hit subscribe for more hidden gems and tell us what makes you proud of Vietnamese resilience. Now, let's listen. Saigon, 35 degrees Celsius, 90% humidity, and that unmistakable smell. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's not the fish sauce or the exhaust fumes. It's the smell of chaos. And for people like me, old wolves from Manhattan, chaos smells exactly like opportunity. I lean back against the glass railing, looking down at the river of light flowing through the city's veins below. The motorbikes, millions of them. They weave, they shove, frantically rushing forward as if tomorrow will never come. In New York, we call this traffic gridlock. Here, they call it a dynamic economy. I take a sip of whiskey. This expensive imported liquor tastes significantly better when you drink it in a country where GDP per capita has just barely crossed the $4,000 mark. Funny, isn't it? In my hand is a thick stack of reports. The bold, flattering headlines. Rising star, Asian miracle, the new dragon. The World Bank calls this a remarkable development success story. The IMF praises the strong recovery. Even the United States Institute of Peace identifies this place as a rising middle power. Miracle. A word for dreamers and unrealistic journalists. In my world, there are no miracles. Only valuation and leverage. I didn't come here to admire the resilience or hospitality that travel magazines like Condé Nast Traveler keep incessantly praising. I came here for one reason only: arbitrage. Look at it. The world is panicking. China is slowing down. Supply chains are snapping. And global capital, like floodwater, is fleeing to find the lowest ground. And that low ground, right now, is Vietnam. They call it the China plus one strategy. I call it the find a cheaper place to exploit strategy. I flip a page of the report. Vietnam is a top destination for FDI, the world's new manufacturing hub. Of course. When labor costs in Shenzhen rise, big corporations like Samsung or Apple don't move factories because they love pho or banh mi. They come here because labor is cheap. It's simple math. A local broker named Tuan, dressed a bit too sharply for necessity, walks up to my table. He smiles, that industrial smile I've seen in hundreds of other emerging markets. "Hello, Mr. Mark," he says, voice full of enthusiasm. "How do you find our city? The energy is amazing, isn't it? We call this the spirit of do whatever it takes." I look at him, then down at the chaotic mass of people below. "Energy?" I reply, my voice cold. "Tuan, you see energy. I see disorganization. You see high-rise buildings going up. I see a real estate bubble inflating. You talk about the factory of the world, but I only see rudimentary assembly lines where workers only know how to turn screws according to instructions." Tuan pauses for a moment, but keeps his forced smile. "But sir, the indicators are all very good. GDP growth is forecast at 6.5% to 7%. We have a young, smart workforce and naive," I cut him off. "That's what I like best, the naivety." I stand up, walking closer to the edge of the railing. The wind hits my face. "Listen, Tuan, you guys think you're turning into a dragon, but in reality, you're just the lucky beneficiaries of the trade war between the big guys. You are the temporary third-party winner. I've read the dossier. 86% of expats are happy with the low cost of living here. Why? Because your currency is cheap. Because your labor is cheap." I point toward the cargo ships anchored on the Saigon River. My plan is very simple. I'm not here to partner long-term or build the future. I'm here to buy out undervalued assets cheaply, pump them up with the emerging market label, sell them to idiots in London or Tokyo, and pull out before the bubble bursts. 3 years, that's the maximum timeline I give this market. Tuan looks insulted. He tries to argue. You are underestimating us. The Vietnamese people have resilience. History has proven. History, I laugh out loud, the sound echoing hollowly amidst the smooth jazz music. Don't talk history to Cashflow, Tuan. Cashflow has no memory. I've read about your so-called optimism. Gallup says Vietnamese are among the most optimistic people in the world. Good. Optimism is the best opiate to keep workers laboring 12 hours a day without complaining. I turn my back on the glowing city. In my eyes, those lights aren't hope. They are numbers on an Excel spreadsheet. And I am the one holding the mouse. Tomorrow morning, I command, not bothering to look at Tuan. Take me to that high-tech park you keep rambling about. The place you say produces 40% of Samsung's global phones. I want to see with my own eyes what that manufacturing miracle actually is. I bet I'll just see a dusty workshop and robots running on rice. I down the rest of my drink, bitter with a sweet aftertaste. Vietnam. To the world, it's an inspiring story. To me, Mark, it's just a buffet. And I am starving. I am a predator. And this city, with all its naivete and chaos, is the juiciest prey I've seen in a decade. The sleek black Mercedes glided through the security gate. Tuan sat next to me, still wearing that naive enthusiasm. "Welcome to the future, Mark," he said, gesturing toward the massive blocks of factories stretching as far as the eye could see. "This is where 40% of Samsung's smartphones are produced globally. This is where the global supply chain begins." I smirked, adjusting my silk tie. The future? Tuan, to me, it looks more like a modern labor camp. In my head, the script was already written. I expected to walk into a hot, noisy workshop where thousands of exhausted workers with soulless eyes assembled components like biological robots. I expected to see second-rate technology handed down from obsolete lines in China. I expected sloppiness. But when the automatic doors slid open, a blast of 24°C air hit my face, along with silence. Not a dead silence, but the silence of precision. Hundreds of robotic arms were dancing at speeds the naked eye could barely track. Vietnamese engineers in pristine white protective suits moved with agility, eyes glued to touch panels filled with data. "Clean," I muttered, trying to find a fault. But clean doesn't mean smart. They're just following procedures programmed by Korean or American engineers, right? Suddenly, the ceiling lights flickered. A loud boom echoed from outside. The black sky collapsed. A tropical storm hit as hard as a punch. Sirens began to wail. "Local power grid failure," a voice announced over the PA system. "UPS system activating. Backup generator number 3 is overloading." I looked at Tuan. His face was pale. This was it. The moment of truth. In New York, when this happens, unions scream, managers call lawyers, and everyone flees to the parking lot. The chaos I had predicted. "Let's go, Tuan," I sneered, preparing to head back to the car. "The show is over. I don't want to get stuck in this damp warehouse." But Tuan didn't move. And no one else moved either. Instead, I witnessed something bizarre. No one ran in panic. No screaming. Only short, sharp commands shouted in Vietnamese. "Technical Team A, check the generators. Production Team, protect the semiconductor batch. Shield the west entrance, water is coming in." A young female engineer, petite, wearing glasses, rushed into the center of the hall. She didn't call her boss. She didn't wait for instructions. She was the instruction. "Activate emergency protocol," she shouted, her hands flying across a tablet. "We cannot let this chip batch be ruined by humidity. Nam, mobilize the logistics team to sandbag the doors now. IT team, switch data to the backup cloud server." I stood rooted to the spot. This was not the reaction of wage earners who only knew how to turn screws. This was the reaction of an elite military unit. I saw workers whose shifts should have ended, dropping their bags, rolling up their sleeves, and rushing in to help. They didn't complain. They didn't ask about overtime pay. They worked with a terrifying focus. My report said the Vietnamese were industrious, but I thought that meant passive diligence. No, this was the spirit of do whatever it takes. The female engineer, her badge read Lin, was arguing fiercely with a foreign expert over the walkie-talkie. "No, we can't shut down," she said in fluent steel-hard English. "If we shut down now, the thermal shock will destroy the wafers. We will maintain manual cooling until the generator is fixed. Trust me. She turned to her engineering team. Guys, we have 15 minutes. Who has a workaround for the cooling system? I can bypass through the auxiliary circuit, a young guy raised his hand. Do it. I take full responsibility, Lynn commanded. I watched them, my jaw dropping. My arrogance was being washed away, bit by bit, by the rain outside. These were not unskilled or backward people. They were handling a complex industrial crisis with speed and creativity I rarely saw in factories in Ohio or Detroit. 10 minutes passed, tense as 10 years. The generator roared back to life. The lights blazed. The cooling system stabilized. Applause broke out, but only for a split second. They immediately returned to their stations as if nothing had happened. Lynn wiped sweat from her forehead and exhaled sharply. She saw me, the Western guy in a suit standing dumbfounded in the corner. She gave a slight nod, a gesture both polite and proud, then turned back to her screen. I turned to Tuan. He was panting too, but his smile had returned, a real one this time. Mr. Mark, Tuan said, his voice trembling with emotion. You just saw it. This is how we work. We don't have as many resources as you do, but we have the people. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, despite the 100% humidity outside. My prejudice of a cheap labor workshop had just been crushed by a girl less than 1.6 meters tall and a team I had looked down upon. I recalled the line in the Bloomberg report, Vietnam benefits from supply chain diversification. I thought they were lucky. But standing here, amidst the hum of machinery running smoothly after the storm, I realized there was no luck here. Companies didn't move here because it was cheap. They came because of these people. I pulled out my phone. No signal. But I didn't need to call anyone. I needed to think. Tuan, I said, my voice lowered, stripped of its mockery. That girl, that engineer, where did she study? MIT? Harvard? Tuan shook his head proudly. No, sir. Bak Kwa University. 100% domestically trained. She represents the young, educated workforce you read about in the U.S. State Department report. I looked at Lynn again. She was laughing with a colleague, a strangely optimistic smile. This shock wasn't just about technology. It was about spirit. And for the first time since setting foot in this country, I felt fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear that I had been completely wrong. I can't sleep. The image of that petite engineer named Lynn screaming into her walkie-talkie in the middle of the storm keeps replaying in my mind. That wasn't luck. That was discipline. And in the financial world, discipline isn't born, it's forged. I called my data analytics team in New York, waking them up at 2 p.m. their time. Send me everything, I roared. Not the brief snippets on Bloomberg. I want the deep dive reports. Brookings, McKinsey, Cambridge, strategic studies from the U.S. Institute of Peace. I want to know what the hell is actually running this country. And now, 4 hours later, I'm sitting in a sea of data. And what I found, it sends a chill down my spine. I was wrong to think Vietnam was just piggybacking on China's rise. I thought they were just farmers learning to do industry. But these documents are telling a different story. A story of grand strategy. Look at this. I always thought the Doi Moi reforms of 1986 were just a desperate reaction to the collapse of the Soviet bloc, a firefighting act. But this study from Cambridge University indicates I was dead wrong. It didn't start in 1986. It started in the 1970s, right after the war. While the world thought they were sleeping in victory, their leaders, men I once considered rigid, were conducting clandestine studies on Western economics. They foresaw the technological backwardness of the Soviet bloc a decade before it collapsed. My God, I whisper, my hand trembling as I hold my black coffee. This isn't a reaction. This is a 40-year blueprint. They calculated engaging the West to extract advanced technology a long time ago. That factory I saw this afternoon? It wasn't an accident. It was the result of a cross-century vision. The Brookings Institution calls this a manufacturing miracle, but I call it strategic patience. I switched to the second screen, the geopolitical map. On Wall Street, we have a term, hedging. You never put all your eggs in one basket. You balance the risk. In Vietnam, they are masters of hedging at a national level. They call it bamboo diplomacy. I read aloud the definition from the Heritage Foundation. Independence, diversification, balance. Sounds cliché, right? But look at the actual data. In just 1 year, they hosted the US president, the Chinese president, and the Russian president. Who does that? No one. No other country in the world can shake hands with all three rival superpowers without getting crushed. I look at the FDI inflow chart. It's growing despite global crises. Why? Because investors like me hate political risk, and Vietnam has turned diplomatic balance into an economic product. Absolute stability. The U.S. Institute of Peace identifies them as a rising middle power and an increasingly important partner. They don't pick sides, they pick themselves. And by doing so, they make the whole world come knocking. Tuan knocks on the door, bringing a new stack of files. He looks at me, eyes dark with fatigue, but lighting up when he sees me immersed in the research. "Mr. Mark," Tuan says softly, "what are you looking for?" "I'm looking for a weakness, Tuan," I reply, not taking my eyes off the screen. "I'm trying to find a reason to believe this is all a bubble, but I can't find it." I point to a blue bar chart skyrocketing upwards. "PISA results," I say. OECD's Program for International Student Assessment. In 2015, Vietnamese students ranked 8th in the world in science, outperforming Germany, the Netherlands, and the US. In 2022, you guys still ranked in the top tier for math, despite having a much lower income level. The World Bank says your human capital index is the highest among middle-income economies. I spin my chair around to face Tuan. "Do you know what this means?" "It means Lynn, that engineer yesterday, wasn't an exception. She is the standard. You guys don't just have cheap labor, you have an army of intellect waiting to be activated. And you invested in education like it was a national defense weapon." I feel a jolt of electricity run down my spine. This feeling, the last time I felt it was when I realized the potential of the internet in 1998. The feeling of being overwhelmed by an obvious truth that the whole world is underestimating. I stand up, pacing the room. "They played me, Tuan," I mutter, half joking, half serious. "They played the whole world. We thought you were obedient sheep doing assembly work, but actually, you are chess grandmasters playing a game that spans 50 years. I look at the report on governance quality. PAPI and PCI indices show steady improvements in transparency and accountability. Even the anti-corruption campaign is viewed positively by risk agencies, creating a new business standard. I recall my arrogance at the bar yesterday. "Cash flow has no memory," I said. Wrong. Damn it, I was wrong. Here, cash flow does have a memory. It is built on the memory of war, of poverty, and of an iron will to never return to that past. That is a kind of power that no financial model on Wall Street can quantify. I pick up my phone. 3 a.m. The board in New York is getting ready for lunch. I need to call them. Not to report on a flip deal, but to warn them. "Tuan," I say, my voice stern. "Book me a flight. Not back to New York. I want to go to Hanoi. I want to meet the people who actually wrote this script. I want to see that bamboo with my own eyes." I look out the window. Saigon is still awake, but now I no longer see chaos. I see a massive, complex, and incredibly sophisticated machine in operation. I found their DNA, and it's not submission. It is strategic adaptation. "Mark," Harrison says, dispensing with pleasantries, "what the hell are you doing in Hanoi? We are waiting for the asset liquidation report. You promised to wrap up the Saigon deal in 6 months. Now you're sending me a proposal for a 10-year long-term investment? Did you catch tropical malaria or something?" I take a deep breath, looking straight into the camera. I see myself in Harrison's eyes, arrogant, hasty, and blind. But that Mark died in the storm at the factory the day before yesterday. "I don't have a fever, Harrison," I reply, my voice strangely calm. "I just woke up." I slide the thick dossier toward the camera. "Forget that flip plan. If we pull capital out now, we will be the biggest idiots in Wall Street history. Harrison smirks, the sound crackling through the speakers. Don't be dramatic, Mark. It's just a frontier market, a cheap assembly shop. We make 20% profit and pull out before political risk hits. That's the rule. Political risk? I cut him off, my voice hardening. What are you talking about, Harrison? Are you reading reports from 1975? I stand up, walking closer to the screen, pointing at the chart I prepared. Look at this. You're worried about instability? Vietnam is the only country in Southeast Asia, and perhaps the world, that has hosted the US president, the Chinese president, and the Russian president within a single year. Do you understand the significance of that? Harrison falls silent, frowning. It means they are masters of diplomacy, I continue, my voice growing more passionate. The US Institute of Peace calls them a rising power. They are not pawns on the chessboard of superpowers. They are the chess players. They have created an absolute safe zone for our capital. The political stability here isn't imposed, Harrison. It is a product of strategic intellect. And there's more. I flip to the next page, the image of the high-tech factory. You call them a cheap workshop? Wrong. Brookings calls this a manufacturing miracle. I saw it with my own eyes, Harrison. I saw 25-year-old engineers solving system crises without foreign experts holding their hands. They have the highest human capital index among middle-income economies. They aren't just assembling, they are starting to create. Harrison sighs, taking off his glasses to wipe them. Mark, you sound more like a missionary than a fund manager. You're letting emotions drive you. We need numbers. Why should we bury capital there for 10 years? Because of the consumer, I reply instantly. You think they only produce for export? No, the middle class here is exploding. Condé Nast Traveler calls this a must-visit destination. Their cuisine ranks 20th in the world. The people are among the most optimistic in the world about the future. They are spending money, Harrison, and they love technology, fashion, high-end services. This isn't a factory. This is a massive consumer market. I pause for a moment, my voice softening, becoming more sincere. Harrison, listen to me. I came here like a vulture. I intended to pick them clean. But I realized one thing. Our arrogance is the biggest barrier. I confess, I say, looking straight into Harrison's eyes. I underestimated them. I viewed them through the lens of the past, of Hollywood war movies. But they moved past that war a long time ago. They hold no grudges. They welcomed us more warmly than anywhere else I've ever been. They are pragmatic. They are hungry to learn. And most importantly, they have an iron will to rise that I have never seen anywhere else. Harrison stays silent for a long time. So what do you want, Mark? I want to cancel the sell order, I say firmly. I want to shift the entire portfolio to a strategic long-term partnership strategy. We don't buy assets to resell. We invest in infrastructure, in education, in technology with them. We won't exploit Vietnam, we will grow with Vietnam. That's a big gamble, Mark, Harrison warns. If you're wrong, you lose your seat. I'm not wrong, I smile, the confident smile of someone who has seen the future. The world calls this the new Vietnam. The World Bank calls it a success story. I call it the biggest opportunity of the 21st century. I am betting my entire personal equity on this deal. The boardroom in New York gasps. Betting personal equity is the highest oath on Wall Street. Harrison stares at me through the screen. Finally, he gives a slight nod. All right, Mr. Vietnam. You have 3 years to prove this vision. Don't let me down. The screen goes black. I sit down in the chair, sweat soaking the back of my shirt, but my heart feeling light. I look out the window of the Metropole Hotel. Hanoi at night is peaceful and ancient, distinct from the vibrancy of Saigon, yet exuding a durable dignity. I am no longer a predator. I have become a believer. Mark picks up a glass of wine, raising a toast to the city. Welcome to the team, Mark, I say to myself. They say the darkest part of the night is just before the dawn. I used to think that was just an empty platitude, but standing here in Vietnam, I realize it is a historical truth. I came to this country as an appraiser. I appraised the land, I appraised the labor, I appraised the resources. I thought I could buy everything with dollars. But throughout this insane journey, I have realized something that no balance sheet can record. The value of rebirth. Mark turns around, watching the locals doing their morning exercises with relaxed smiles. Look at them. We in the West often view Vietnam through the lens of the past. We see helicopters, jungles, and bombs. But as historian Mai Elliott rightly said, Vietnam is a country, not a war. I was wrong to look for scars, because the Vietnamese don't live to hide their scars, but neither do they live to mourn them. They have done something far more extraordinary. They turn their scars into muscle. I ask myself, how can a country devastated to the point of being bombed back to the Stone Age rise to become a World Bank remarkable development success story in just one generation? How did they slash poverty from 70% to under 5%? The answer doesn't lie in miracles. I hate that word. Miracles imply luck falling from the sky. No. This is resilience. Brazilian scholar Pedro de Oliveira called this the ability to rise from the ashes, but I see it more like the image of the bamboo. Bamboo diplomacy, the term they use to describe their foreign policy, is actually their philosophy of life. Bamboo has roots that go deep into thousands of years of culture. The stem is flexible. It can bend before the storms of superpowers, of natural disasters, of market fluctuations, but it never breaks. And when the storm passes, it springs back, greener, stronger. That is why they can balance between the US, China, and Russia. That is why they could face the COVID-19 pandemic with a unity the whole world had to envy. They aren't rigid like oak trees, waiting to be snapped. They are flexible. They adapt. Mark takes a plane ticket out of his pocket, then crumples it up and tosses it into a nearby bin. I learned the biggest lesson in economics here, not from Harvard textbooks, but from how the Vietnamese treated me. Someone from a country that was once their adversary. They welcomed me. 89% of expats feel welcomed here. Condé Nast Traveler calls them one of the friendliest peoples in the world. Why? Why can they forgive? Because they understand a truth that Wall Street often forgets. Hatred is a bad debt. Forgiveness is an investment capital for the future. They chose not to carry the debt of the past so they could run faster toward the future. That is a brilliant strategic choice. That is why Gallup ranks them among the most optimistic people in the world. That optimism is the endless fuel for this economy. I used to think the American dream was the pinnacle, but here I see a different dream. The Vietnam dream. It is not a dream of solitary individual success. It is a dream of the rise of an entire community. From Lin the engineer at the factory, to Tuan the broker, to the lady selling pho at the corner, they all share a fierce belief that tomorrow will be better than today. I am not leaving. I am staying. Not to pray, but to learn how to become a bamboo. Vietnam is no longer just an emerging market in my eyes. It is a teacher. The world is getting old, tired, and full of division. But Vietnam is getting younger. They say this is a rising dragon. I say, this is a phoenix reborn. And this time, it will fly very high.